everybody, thank you so much for watching. It is so good to see you all again. And if you're new here, then a very warm Mel's Yarniverse welcome to you. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this amazingly comfortable granny square sweater using only 4 granny squares. Can you believe it? There's absolutely no sewing involved, which makes this a perfect project if you're an absolute beginner crocheter, and I can guarantee it's going to fit every single time you make it. How? Well, put the kettle on, make yourself a nice warm cuppa or a nice cool drink if you need one, get nice and comfy, and I'll explain it all in just a sec. So how do I know that this jumper is going to fit you every single time? Well, we're going to take one of your favorite jumpers that you already own and that you know fits you beautifully, and we're going to take the measurements from that and use it to make this particular project. That also means if you're planning on making this project for somebody else, be it a friend or a family member, all you need to do is take their measurements from their favorite jumper and you'll know it'll fit them too. Isn't that easy? Now, this design features these amazing open, flowy, swingy sleeves. I just love them. They're absolutely so comfortable and they're just my favorite thing to wear right now. They look fantastic. But if you're someone that's looking for a more fitted and tapered sleeve, I am actually working on another pattern which is based on this design, but just has more tapered sleeves. It also has cuffs and ribbing along the bottom of the jumper too. So if that's something you're interested in, keep an eye out over the next few weeks and I'll get that tutorial out soon. But for this video, we're focused on these beautiful open sleeves. So let's take a look at the materials you need to make it. So the materials you're going to need for this particular project are any yarn that's available to you, anti-pilling if possible. Now, the reason I say that is because I made this particular project using 100% acrylic yarn, which is super soft and really comfortable. However, it is starting to pill, specifically around the sleeves and the front of the jumper. So I'm noticing that quite a bit. So it occurred to me to let you know that if you have the option to use anti-pilling yarn, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, the project will still work with whatever yarn you have available to you. So if you have a huge stash of scrap yarn left over from other projects, maybe you've got some pure wool sitting there, maybe you've got acrylic or a cotton and acrylic blend, whatever you have available will work for this project. You'll also need the appropriate sized crochet hook to match the yarn that you're choosing to use. You'll need your favorite sweater to use for your measurements. You'll also need stitch markers, a tape measure, some scissors, and a darning needle. Now let's talk measurements. What exact measurements do you need to make this project? Well, you'll need to measure the length of your sweater, the length of the sleeves, and the width of your sweater. Now, how exactly do you do that? Well, to measure the length of your sweater, you'll need to measure from the top of your shoulder to the bottom of the sweater, and this will tell you how long to make your front and back granny squares. You'll need to measure from armpit to armpit across the front of your jumper, and this will tell you how wide to make your front and back granny squares. You'll also need to measure the length of your sleeve. To do that, you use your tape measure and start it at the top of your shoulder and measure down to the bottom of the cuff of your sleeve. This will tell you exactly how long you need to make your sleeves. Okay, so with all that important information out of the way, let's get to the fun stuff. Grab your crochet hook and some yarn and let's start making our granny squares. Okay, so what am I working with today? Today I have a 5mm or H-sized Clover or more crochet hook. Now you should be using whichever size is going to work with the yarn that you've chosen for this project. The yarn I've chosen is the Lion brand Ferris Wheel 100% acrylic. Now unfortunately this is not anti-pilling yarn, so I do expect this to pill a little bit, but that's okay. I've also got 4 stitch markers which are going to help us to mark out our corners, which just makes them a little quicker and a little easier to identify as we go. All right, so today I'll be starting with a magic circle or a magic ring. Now, a lot of people have a lot of trouble with a magic ring. If you are one of them, the easiest way to avoid using a magic circle is to start with a slip knot. So I'll show you how to do that now. Just wrap the yarn around your finger twice. Grab the back loop and pull it over the top of the front loop. and then grab the back loop again and pull it back over and off your finger. Then just tighten both yarn strings at the bottom, and there's your slip knot. Pop that on your hook, pull on the tail, and you're ready to go. So to chain, we yarn over, pull through the loop, and do that again. Just chain 2, chain 3, and chain 4. And then to make our magic ring or magic circle, you slip stitch back into that first chain that you made. So grab the yarn and pull it through that first loop, and then pull it through the second loop on your hook, and that's your slip stitch. And now you've made yourself a ring to put all of your other stitches in. So see that ring in the middle there? That's where all your stitches will go, into there. But because I'm going to be using a magic circle, I'll show you how I do that as well. So to make a magic circle, the easiest way I found to do it is to lay the yarn across my fingers like that, wrap it around the first 2 fingers and make a cross like that, and then pull it back over and hold it in place with my little finger there. Then I grab my crochet hook, I face it down, put it under the first loop, over the top of the second, pull that through and under that first loop, twist my crochet hook so I now have a loop on my hook. I then put the hook back under the string back here, or the tail back here, and pull that through the loop that's on my hook. And that's how I make a magic ring. So now I can tighten that and start to make my stitches. Okay, so from here we chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and this is going to be our first double crochet. So making granny squares are usually done using double crochet stitches. So hopefully you know how to make a double crochet. If not, I'll show you how to do that next. Yarn over, insert your hook into your magic ring that you've made, yarn over again, pull that through. You now have 3 loops on your crochet hook. Yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over again and pull through the second 2 loops, and that's your double crochet. So now technically in this cluster, we now have 1 chain 3, which is working as our double crochet, and our second double crochet. So now we need 1 more. So yarn over, insert your hook into your ring again, yarn over again and pull that through. Yarn over, pull through those first 2 stitches, and yarn over and pull through the last 2 stitches. You now have 3 double crochet, or 1 chain 3, 2 double crochet in your magic ring. It should be looking like that. The next thing we need to do is chain 2. Chain 2, and what we're technically doing is creating our first corner. Now we're going to make another cluster. A cluster is just a term we use for 3 double crochet all in the same space. So sometimes it can be a different stitch that you use, and sometimes you could be working into an actual stitch or a chain space. But for now, we're working into our magic ring that we've made, and we're making clusters, which is 3 double crochets. So let's go ahead and do those. Pull through, that's 1. Yarn over, in we go again. Pull that back through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, so that's 2. Yarn over your hook into the ring, yarn over again and pull that through. Yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2 again. And there's our next 3 double crochet. So now we chain 2 again, 1 and 2, and now we're making our next cluster. So you do again 3 double crochet into that ring, pull through and pull through. There's 2, 1 more, pull through 2, and pull through 2, and there's our third. So now we need to chain 2 again, 1 and 2, and then we go back around and we do our last 3 double crochets. So yarn over again into the ring, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2 again, do that again, and again, last double crochet of this round, and there's our 4th cluster. So now we chain 2, and to complete this round, because we've got our 4 clusters and our 4 corners, well, we've got 1, 2, 3, and we're about to make our 4th. To close this off, we need to slip stitch into the top of that chain 3 that we first made. So insert your hook under the first 2 loops on the top of the stitch, yarn over and pull that through that stitch, and then pull that loop through the loop on your hook, and that's your slip stitch. And there is your first round. So you've done 1, 2, 3, 4 clusters, and you've done your slip stitch to close off your round. So the next thing we need to do is grab that tail from your magic ring. You'll see it on the back there. Just going to pull my hook out. So I'm just going to pull that through a bit so I can show you the back. So there's the back tail. And what we need to do is tighten that to pull that hole in the middle closed. So just hang on to your work and pull that tail through the middle. And as you can see, that's tightened up that middle ring, and pull it through until it's nice and tight. Don't want to pull it too tight. You just want to make sure that it's closed off that ring in the middle. And now you can see the square that we've made. So what I need you to do now is grab your stitch markers and put them in those chain 2 spaces, those gaps that we made by chaining 2. And we go around again. And they're in those corners. Now, I'm not going to put the last one in here, in that last chain 2 space that we made, and I'll show you why in just a second. But by putting these stitch markers in, you can start to identify your corners. These are going to be the corners of your squares. So your chain 2 spaces should always be where these stitch markers are. All right, let's continue. So to start round 2, we need to chain 3 and then turn our work. Now, the reason that we're turning our work is because if you don't turn your work and you continue working in the round, which means continue working all the way around and around this way, your work will start to twist. And I'll show you an example of that now. In this particular example, you can quite clearly see that the square is actually being twisted around to the right-hand side. It's going clockwise. So you can see that that's being pulled around. The reason that's being pulled around is because instead of what we're doing here and chaining and turning our work, what they've done is they've done their slip stitch to finish off that round, and then they've slip stitched into the next 2 stitches and then slip stitched into this chain space here and then continued working their row. And then they do it again and again and again each row around. And when you do that, you start to pull the yarn in a circle. You pull it around, and the weight of that pulls the yarn and it twists it around. So the only way to avoid doing that is to use this chain 3 and turn your work method. That way you make sure your squares are always nice and flat and even. So we've done our chain 3. We know that we've got the right side of the work facing us because our tail is on the back. So if you're ever not sure which is the right side and which is the wrong side of your work, look for where your tail is. If the tail is facing you, then you've got the wrong side facing you and the right side's on the other side. If the tail is at the back, like it is right now, then we know that we have the right side facing us and the wrong side facing that way. So we're turning our work so that we now have the wrong side and the tail facing us. So for round 2, we've done our chain 3, which means we've done our first double crochet. And this time we're working into this chain space right in front of us. So when we're making granny squares, we don't work into the individual stitches at the top here. So you can see the little V shapes across the top there. Those are the actual stitches. Those are the tops of the double crochets that we're making, but we don't work into here. Where we're working is into these gaps or these chain spaces that we're making. So I just wanted to make that nice and clear. So again, the tail should be facing you, and we're working into the chain space directly in front of the chain 3 that we just made. So we're putting 2 double crochets in this chain space. That's 1. And that's 2. Now to get across to this corner space or this chain 2 space here, I'm going to chain 1 and then I'm going to start my next corner cluster in this chain 2 space. To do that, we start with our 3 double crochet, then we do chain 2 and then we 3 double crochet again. That's every corner will be made this way. So we do our 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3, chain 2, and then 3 double crochet again into that same space, that same gap that we're working into. If your stitch marker gets in your way, you can just remove it and we'll replace it in a minute. 2, last one goes in there. 3. So what we've done is make our new corner. So that was a corner cluster, 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. So the next thing to do is just loosen that up a little bit, grab your stitch marker out. We don't want it in that corner anymore. Now we need it in this corner, this new space that we've made. And this will always show us where our corners are. So once again, we've got to go across to this corner. To get there, I'm going to chain 1. And now we've got to do our next corner cluster, which is 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. So let's do that now. In we go. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, and then our 3 double crochet again. 1, 2, and the last one for this corner, 3. So there we have another corner. So once again, we just want to take that out and move our stitch marker again. So let's put our stitch marker back in this corner. And it's the chain space that we just made is our new corner. Put your hook back in. To get across to the next corner, we need to chain 1. And then we're in again with our 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. If it's easier for you to remove your stitch marker before you start, you can do that. because you know where you're working into that gap. And we're doing our 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet again. So there's that first one, 2, 3. I need to chain 2 and then put our next 3 in that same chain space. 1, 2, and 3. So there's my next corner. So once again, I'm going to put my stitch marker in that gap so that I know where my corner is. There we go. So now I can see my corners. And now to finish off the round, we need to finish off this corner cluster over here. So this is where we started. This is our first chain 3, which is being used as our first double crochet. We need to complete that cluster because we've only got 1 3 double crochet cluster in here. We need the other 3 and the chain 2 to finish off this corner. So to get across, we chain 1. And then in this last chain space that you have in your row, we're going to put 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Then we chain 2 to finish that corner. And now to finish the round, we need to slip stitch into the top of that chain 3 like we did at the end of the first round. So you need to go under that top 2 loops with your hook. Can be a bit tricky sometimes. Yarn over and pull that through under that stitch. So you've got 2 loops on your hook and then pull that first loop in under the second loop and there's your slip stitch. So now your granny square should have your 4 clusters in the middle and then you've got 1 corner, 2 corners, 3 corners, and we've just completed the 4th corner. So we now have 4 corners and our square's starting to take shape. It's looking pretty good, isn't it? All right. So to start the 3rd round, we do the same as we did last time. We chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and we turn our work again. And so now that tail that we were looking at before should now be in the back and you should be looking at the right side or front view of your work. Your stitch markers should be in your corners and we're about to start round 3. We're going into this chain 2 space in the corner. So into here we go. We do our double crochets. So we do 2 double crochets in this chain 2 space. All right. Now we've got a chain 1 space here. Here's our corner over here. Here's the corner we're starting with. There's a chain space here in the middle. So in the middle, we're going to do 3 double crochet. But to get over there, we need to do our chain 1 first. So chain 1. And then in this chain 1 space here, which is on the side of your square, you'll notice that you now have corners with chain 2 spaces. And in between the corners, you now have a gap or a chain 1 space that we created in the last row. So we're now going to start putting clusters in these chain 1 spaces. So these are chain 2 corners, chain 1 spaces along the side of the square. So to put our next cluster in, we're doing 3 double crochet in this chain 1 space here. A fluffy bit of yarn there. And 3. Now to get over to the corner, we need to chain 1 And now because we can see the stitch marker, we know this is a corner cluster. So that means 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, all in this same space. So let's do that now. There's my 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 more double crochet, all in the same corner space. Again, if your stitch marker is getting in the way, you can take that out now. And then we'll put it back in just a moment. Okay, there's our 3 and our chain 2. So I'm going to move my stitch marker now. Take that one out of there and put it in the new corner that we've just made. So now we can see this as a corner. And we have, once again, a chain 1 space before the corner space. So to get to that chain 1 space, we chain 1. And we add 3 double crochet into the chain 1 space. Then to get to the corner, we chain 1 again. And now we're back at a chain 2 space, which means we need to 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. So let's do that now. Chain 2, 3 double crochet. Might move that stitch marker, I think. Okay, put that stitch marker back in that corner space we just made. Once again, we're back at a chain 1 space. We know it's not a corner because there's no stitch marker in it. So we can see that this is the chain 1 space. So once again, to get over to it, we chain 1. And then we put a cluster in this chain 1 space. And my yarn stuck. There we go. 2 and 3 double crochets. Then to get to the corner, we chain 1. And then we do our corner cluster again. So 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet again. This will be our 3rd corner for this round. 2 and 3 double crochet, chain 2, and 3 double crochet to finish that off, all in that same chain space. 2 and 3. So we once again move our stitch marker so that we can see our corners. Put our stitch marker back in the new corner we just made. There's our corner there. We've got one last chain 1 space here. So to chain 1 to get over to that and do our cluster in here, which is 3 double crochet. 2, 3. Chain 1 to get back over to our last corner. Now this is once again where we started. There's our chain 3 to begin the round, and our 2 double crochet in that first chain space there that we first created. So now we need to complete that corner cluster by adding the last 3 double crochet and a chain 2. So let's do that now. 1, 2, and 3 double crochet. We chain 2, and once again, to finish off the round, we slip stitch into the top of this chain 3 that we started with. So pull that through and pull that through there. So now you can see how this pattern is starting to form. You can see that our first round had our 4 clusters and we made 4 corners. In our second round, we added corners again, but we also added a chain 1 space in between our corners. By making the third round, we've continued on with our corners, but we've now added 2 chain 1 spaces. So we've got our corner, chain 1 space, cluster, chain 1 space, corner. Now, corner clusters are always made with a 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. Then we've got a chain 1 space and a cluster, a chain 1 space again, and then our next corner. So 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. We've got a chain 1 space, a cluster, a chain 1 space, a corner cluster, which is 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, our chain 1 space, our cluster, our chain 1 space, and our final corner. So your granny square should be looking something like that. Are you beginning to see the repeat pattern that you need to use to make a granny square? Hopefully this has been nice and clear for you so far, but if you have any questions, by all means leave them down in the comments below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And hopefully you can see how straight this granny square is. We're not twisting, there's no twists, there's no pull on our square. It's looking nice and straight and has nice straight corners. Okay, let's keep going. So once again, to start the round, we need to chain 3, 2, 3, and we turn our work. And once again, we're going to start our first cluster in that first chain space that we've got right in front of us. So in with our first 2 double crochets. I'm going to work slightly faster now because I think you know what's happening. I think you can see the pattern that's forming. So to get to these chain 1 spaces, we need to chain 1 and put our next 3 double crochet in that chain 1 space. And then because we have another chain 1 space coming up, we chain 1 again and do another cluster in that chain 1 space. Now to get over to the corner, we need to chain 1. And now we know our corner clusters next. So our corner cluster is always 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, all in that same space. So let's do that next. And 3 double crochet. Grabbing the wrong yarn. Remember to move your stitch marker so you can continue following your corners. Just helps a little bit until you get the hang of it. It just helps you to identify those corner spaces. Remember to chain 1 to get to your chain 1 spaces and add your next 3 double crochet. Chain 1 again to get to the next chain 1 space for your next cluster. To get over to your corner, don't forget to chain 1. And now we're back at our next corner. So I think you can see already what's happening. So I'll let you complete the next part of the round and I'll meet you back at the end here. So don't forget, chain 2 spaces are identified by your stitch marker. So we know that those are your corners and those need 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. And then when you get around to this last corner that doesn't have a stitch marker in it, I'll meet you back here to remind you how to finish off the row. See you soon, guys. Okay, so I've just done my last cluster in the chain 1 space there for the row. I've chained 1 and now I'm going into my final cluster and this will complete this corner and complete this row. So to do that, we need to add 3 double crochets into this last chain 2 space. 1, 2, and 3. Because it's a chain 2 corner, we need to chain 2. And then once again, to complete the row, slip stitch into the top of that chain 3 that started the row. And slip stitch in through there. And we have completed row 4. So we're doing really well, guys. Your square should look like this. You should have the tail facing you because we just finished a wrong side facing. We've now got our corners. We've still got our stitch markers in the corner and we've just completed our final row. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 rows done. Well done, guys. You've just finished the 4th round and your square should be looking something like this. It should be nice and flat and even without a twist in it. We can see our corner spaces quite clearly because we have our stitch markers in them. We can see that each corner cluster has a 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet combination in it. And then we have our chain 1 spaces in between. So we're only chaining 1 along the sides and then we chain 2 in the corners only. So you're starting to see that pattern take over, which is fantastic. Now, incidentally, this is the same pattern that you'll use to make all 4 of the granny squares that you need for this project. So from here, you just need to continue doing what we've been doing each row until you reach those measurements. So let me just give you a quick reminder on how to measure your granny square. So measuring across will give you the width of your square. Measuring from top to bottom will give you the length. So you grab your tape measure and just measure across the middle of your square. I can see that my square is roughly 4 inches across, and because it is a square, I know that it'll also be 4 inches long. So this is the length and this is the width. So what you need to do is continue working those rounds until you reach the measurements that you took earlier from your jumper or your sweater. Now, if you reach the width measurement, but it's not long enough, the next thing I'll show you is how to add rows to your square to make the square longer. Need to do it a certain way to make sure that the square stays even. So I'll show you that next. Okay, so I've been working on my granny square for a while and I can see that I've hit the width measurement of my front panel, but it's not quite long enough yet. So how do I lengthen my square? Well, let me show you how it's done. Now, I only use this technique to lengthen my front and back squares only. To lengthen my sleeves, I just keep working rows around and around my granny square until it gets to the length I need. That's how I end up with those wide, flowy cuffs on my sweater. So we need to start with a slip knot. Now, the easiest way to do that is to wrap the yarn around your finger twice and then just hold that in place. Grab the back loop and pull it over the front loop. Then grab the back loop again and pull it over the front loop and all the way off your finger and let that go. Then we grab the 2 tails at the bottom here and pull them down, and that just tightens the slip knot. So pop that on your crochet hook and tighten that tail and we're ready to go. Now, you need to have a look at your square and make sure that you've got the right side facing you. And by right side, I mean the correct side you need to be working on. So because we've been turning our rows every time we finish a round, you need to have a look at the last row that you completed and see if that's a right side facing or a wrong side facing row. Now you can tell that by having a close look at the stitches. If you can see the proper loops in the front and what your stitches normally look like when you're working in the front, then you're working on the right side of your work. If you turn that over and look at the wrong side, you can see that the stitches look completely differently. Now, if you're not sure, go back to your beginning row. We know that this is the row we started on, and that was the right side. And then count your way out. So if this is the right side, this is wrong side, right side, wrong side, right side, wrong side, right side, wrong side, right side, wrong side, right side. So to start your next row, we need to be on the wrong side. So turn your work over so you've got the wrong side facing you, and then we're going to join with a slip stitch. So we're going into the top right corner and we're going to insert our hook into that chain 2 space. Now we're going to join with a slip stitch. So yarn over and pull that yarn through the chain 2 space. So you've now got 2 loops on your hook, and then just pull that front loop there through the loop on your hook, and that's your slip stitch. Now we know this is secure because we started with a slip knot, so that's not going anywhere, and now we've attached the yarn with a slip stitch. So that's not going anywhere. Now to start the row, we need to start with 1 double crochet and a chain 1. So to do that, we're actually going to chain 4, with the first 3 chains working as our double crochet and then an extra chain as our chain 1. So chain 4 to start the row. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we're going to work our clusters into each chain 1 space along the row. Don't forget to chain 1 in between your clusters. So we've already done our chain 1 for this first one. So let's do our double crochets. 2, and that's 3. Then chain 1 and move on to the next cluster. And we do that all across the top of the square. We're not going all the way around because we don't want to add any more to the width or the side of the square. We only want to add some rows to the top of the square, and that's what will give it length. So from here, we're only working across the top and we're stopping at the end of the row. Then we're going to turn our work and work back along the same row. We're not working all the way around the square anymore because we're wide enough. The square is wide enough. We're adding length to the top, and then we're going to add length to the bottom. And the reason we do that is because we want our square to stay even. So if you need to get, say the length of this square is 10 inches long, and you need it to get to 14 inches, you would make sure that you did enough rows at the top to reach 2 inches long, and you'd do the other 2 inches at the bottom of the square, and that would keep the shape even. So however many rows you do at the top of the square, you need to do the same number at the bottom to keep that nice and even. All right, let's continue on with this row. And I'll meet you at the end of the row to show you how to complete the row. Okay, so you can see that I've put my last cluster into the final chain 1 space, and now we're at the chain 2 corner here. So what we need to do is pop 1 double crochet into the top of this chain 2 here in the corner here to just straighten up the edge. So yarn over and you're working into the stitch, not into the space. And the reason we do that is because it just gives it a little bit more stability and it makes it easier when you're sewing and seaming your squares together. Now, it can be a little bit tricky, but it can be done, I promise you. Doesn't want to let me in just to prove a point on camera. That'd be right. Okay, there we go. So we're in that stitch and we're completing our double crochet. So that will complete the row. Now, to start the next row, we need to do 2 double crochet in the top of this double crochet we've just made. So to do that, we chain 3 as our first double crochet and we turn our work. And then into the bottom of that chain that we've just made, we put 1 more double crochet. So into that stitch, not into the space. Okay, so there's technically 2 double crochet. Even though it's a chain, it's working as a double crochet. So now we need to chain 1 and continue on with our clusters. Now we don't put a cluster into the chain space directly beneath us because we've just done our 2 double crochets at the top here. So you skip this chain space here and work into the next chain space. So we're going into this one, not this one. So in we go with our 3 double crochets. And a chain 1. And we complete that all the way across the row again. So 3 double crochet, chain 1, 3 double crochet, chain 1, all the way across until we get to the end of the row, and then I'll show you how to complete this row. Okay, so I'm at the end of the row. There's our chain 4 that we started with. So our chain 3 with the chain 1 and our cluster. So all we need to do now is put 1 double crochet into the top of the chain 3. So make sure you're in the chain 3. And we're going into the chain 3 stitch, not into the chain space. Again, it is tricky, but it can be done. There we go. So we're in that stitch there. Yarn over, pull that through and finish off our double crochet. And then because we started with 2 double crochet at the start of the row, we need to end with 2 on this end. So we put another double crochet in that same stitch. So that's how you add rows to lengthen your squares. You can see here that we've got a nice straight edge along the side, which is going to help us when we're seaming or joining our squares together. But also you can see that we've got a pattern here. So we've got 1 double crochet, then our clusters, and then in the next row we start with 2 double crochet. So if you had to do 5 or 6 rows to add length, then you would do that same pattern again. So your next row would start with 1 double crochet, then your next row would start with 2 double crochet, then your next one would be 1 double crochet, and then your next one would be 2. And that just helps to give you stability on the sides and keep that straight edge. So if you're continuing rows, make sure you do 1 double crochet and then the next row is 2. Now, don't forget to make sure that you need to spread those rows evenly across both the top and bottom of your squares to keep that shape. Otherwise, it'll get a little bit wonky. This middle section here won't be in the middle of your square anymore. It'll be either closer to the top or closer to the bottom because it's now off center. So to keep this in the middle, make sure you have even number of rows at the top and an even number of rows at the bottom of your square. Okay, what's next? Okay, now comes the exciting part. Now, please excuse my camera being right up in your face. There's no other way I can position it to show you what we need to do next. So, hopefully by this stage, you now have your 4 granny squares ready to go. You can see here I've got my front and my back panel here. And I've got my 2 smaller granny squares for my sleeves over here. So the first thing we need to do is to join our shoulders. So we're going to connect our front and back panels, and I'll show you how to do that now. So move our sleeves out of the way. And what you need to do is just make sure that you've got both your front and your back panels. We want the front side or the right side of your work facing each other so that you've got the wrong side or the back side of your work facing you. And we need to make sure we're doing that with both squares. So we want the right sides facing each other so that the wrong sides are facing out. Now we need to get some stitch markers. So grab your stitch markers we had earlier, and we're going to mark out where our shoulders are and where our neckline is. So the space that we leave between the front and back panel will be our neckline for our jumper, and then these sides over here will be our shoulders. Now we need to make sure that we count the same number of clusters or the same number of chain spaces on either side to make sure that your shoulders are even. Otherwise, you'll have a crooked neckline and no one wants that. All right, so grab your stitch marker and we're going to join these 2 sides together. So that can just go straight through the chain space. And then the same again on the other side. Now, we're just going to count. You should have the same number of clusters and chain spaces in both squares because you would have done the same number of rows to meet those measurements that we took earlier. So for this particular square, I've done 15 rows, and for my sleeves, I did 11 rows, I'm fairly sure. So we need to count across our chain spaces and make sure we have an even number on both sides. So taking out these corners, not counting those, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 chain 1 spaces. So you don't want it to be completely halfway because then you don't have a neckline. So you just want to work out roughly where your neckline needs to be and then put a stitch marker on an even space on both sides. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 chain spaces on my left-hand side. So I'm going to put a stitch marker in there. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, and put a stitch marker in there. So now I know I have enough here, enough of a space here for my head hole or my neckline. So if you are making this for yourself, then you could try that on. So slip this over the top of yourself, pop your head through the neck hole, and just make sure that your shoulders are sitting where they need to and that your neckline isn't too big or too wide for yourself. Now, if it is too wide and you need to close it over, when we're seaming, you could always go across one more chain space, and that would just make that a smaller neckline. So just measure that up against yourself. Make sure that you're happy with the shoulders and with the width of the neckline that you've given yourself. And when you're all happy with that, I'll show you how to join them. So we're going to start in the top right corner, which is where I always start for some reason. And what we're going to do is work through the stitches, not the spaces. So we're going into the stitches to seam across the top, and we're just going to use a single crochet. So to attach the yarn, once again, we need a slip knot. And this time we're going into the stitches. Now you need to make sure that you're using the stitches that are opposite each other in the exact same stitch. So essentially, I'm going to go into the last chain in the chain 2 corner on the front square here under both loops, as you can see. And then we're going to go into the exact same stitch opposite, which is again that last chain in that chain 2 space, into the stitch, not into the gap. can be tricky. Why is this fighting me? Every time I need to do this, it's fighting me. Here we go, we're in. Okay, so we've got both loops from both stitches on the hook. So now we're going to yarn over and pull that through both stitches. Now it looks a little tricky, but it can be done. There's the first one, there's the second. And we now have 2 loops on our hook. Yarn over and pull through both loops. Now we're going to work our single crochets into every stitch in between our 2 stitch markers. So when you go through one stitch on one side, you're going through the same stitch on the other side. And that just makes sure that it's nice and even and that all of your stitches are connecting through the same stitch all the way along. So again, we've gone through both stitches on both squares, yarn over, pull that through, yarn over again and pull through both stitches. So again, through the top 2 loops of the first square, top 2 loops of the stitch on the second square, yarn over, pull that through, yarn over, pull through 2. So just continue that as you go on both squares. Just double check that you're in both squares and that you're in the right stitch for each side. Same thing with the chain 1, in through both sides. Not in the space, but in the actual stitch. Just makes it a little bit more secure. And then continue on through both sides. And you do that through both shoulders. So I'm going to keep going with my single crochets along here. When I get to the chain space where the stitch marker is, I can fasten that off. I'll show you how to do that when I get there too. And then we do the exact same thing over for the other shoulder. So when we get to the other side and we've got the 2 stitch markers showing our other shoulder, we'll attach again with a slip knot and we'll single crochet along this side and fasten off at the end as well. So let's finish this off now. Okay, here we are at the last stitch in the cluster before the chain space. So we need to stop there and we can see that we've done this seam all the way along. So both sides of both squares are joined. So now we can fasten this off here and grab my scissors. Pull that through and I'll weave that in later. Can remove my stitch markers from this side. And we'll have a couple of ends to weave in, but there's our shoulder nice and secure. We can see that we've joined both squares together and that's a nice even seam. So now we need to do the same thing on the other side. So join with a slip knot, single crochet along both squares until you get to the end and then fasten off and weave in your tails. So across here we go. Get to the end, fasten that off. Remember, you're working through the stitches, not the spaces, and I'll see you when that bit is done so I can show you the next step. Okay, so we have our shoulders seamed and everything's looking good. The next step is to attach our sleeves. How exciting. You're doing so well, guys. You're almost done, believe it or not. You're doing really well. Okay, so you're looking at the front panel and the back panel with our shoulders seamed across there, and there is our neck hole or neckline. So we're looking good there. So now we need to bring in our sleeve. So here's my sleeve square. Now again, we have the wrong side of our work facing out so that our seams will be on the inside when we turn it back in the right way. So we need to do the same thing with our sleeves. Now I can see that this is the right side, so I need to turn that over. And what we need to do with our sleeves is attach them to the sides here. So what we need to do on both sides is grab our sleeves, make sure they're wrong sides up with the right side facing down, and we need to count the number of chain spaces and clusters and make sure that we're joining them with an even number on either side of the shoulder. So think of this shoulder point as a middle point for your square. You need to align your sleeve to make sure you have an even amount of chain spaces and clusters on either side. So let's do that now. I'm just going to turn this around so it's a little easier for me. Okay. Here we go. So let's count our chain spaces. We have our 2 corners. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, that makes it nice and easy, doesn't it? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, I cannot believe it, but that's absolutely perfect. Where I put it was exactly where it needed to go. What are the chances of that happening? So what we need to do is grab a stitch marker again, and we're going to join this chain space here to our corner chain space opposite. And we know that's where that's going to start. And we're going to do the same thing with the other side. So we're going into this chain 1 space here and into our chain 2 corner space on our square. So we know that it's in the right spot. We might also put some just along these chain 1 spaces just to hold our square in place as we use our single crochet along the seam. So we just want to hold it in place so it doesn't move around too much. And then what we're going to do is bring this together like that. And we're going to do the same thing that we did with the shoulder. We're going to join with a slip knot at the end here at this first stitch marker. And we're going to seam all the way along here with our single crochet like we just did and fasten off here. So we're going to do that along this side, and then we'll do the exact same thing on the other side, making sure that you've got the same number of chain spaces and clusters on either side to keep it even. So let's seam this up now. Okay, so here's my first sleeve attached. We've seamed along the side here, and that's looking great. I do have a couple of ends to weave in, but that's okay. You can also work over the top of them, which I forgot about until I got this finished. And then I realized I could have just worked straight over the top of them. Hopefully you've been able to do that successfully and it's nice and even. If you've had to add some extra rows to the top of your squares and you had some funny edges to join, hopefully it was easy enough for you to just be able to space the stitches out as evenly as possible and just work through them to get a nice seam there. So now I've got one sleeve attached. I have to do the same thing for the other side. So remember, we need to join with the slip knot on one side and single crochet all the way along, making sure that we're working into the same stitches on both squares. That way we can see here we've made sure that our clusters all align and everything's nice and even. All right, so just finishing off the last of my stitches here in my seam. And then my second sleeve will be attached. And then we can fasten off. And last stitch there we go. Okay. Okay, so fastening off now. Then we can have a look at where we're up to. Let's take a closer look at what we've done so far and what we've still got left to go. So we can see here we've got our neckline, we've done our shoulders, and our shoulders are nicely seamed together. We've also done our sleeves on either side. So let's just fold this the right way. So I'm just grabbing the front and the back panels and folding them together. It's starting to look like a sweater now, isn't it? We can see our sleeve on this side and our other sleeve on this side. So all we have left to do now is to seam up these sides of the sweater and along the bottom of the sleeve. So we're going to go, once we reach the armpit, we're going to go along the side of the sleeve. And then we've only got one more thing left to do to finish our sweater. How exciting, guys. Now it's starting to look like it's supposed to, isn't it? It's getting exciting. Okay, so to start seaming our sides, we do exactly the same thing as we have done. We join with slip stitches into the corner and we're working through both squares. We're going to single crochet all the way along the side here. And then we're going to keep going from the armpit and we're going to single crochet all along the bottom of the sleeves here just to finish that off. So just showing you that I've turned it sideways. So this is how the sweater was. I've now turned it so I can see we've got a bit of an L shape here. So we're going to start here and work along here and then continue working up here. So grab your crochet hook and let's pop that slip knot in and start seaming the sides together. Okay, so all our seaming is done and our sweater is looking fabulous. Have a look at that. We're almost done. So we still have one job left to do and I'm going to show you what that is next. How exciting, guys. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is to just do one row of single crochet around the edge of the cuff on both sleeves. We need to do a row of single crochet around the neckline just to finish that off and along the bottom of our sweater, just again to stabilize the whole project and just to give it a nice polished finished look. All right, let's grab those crochet hooks and get this done. And we are all done. Just need to weave in the ends, but my neckline is done. Let's just pretend that you can't see that there. And doesn't that look much cleaner and much neater than it did before? All done. And doesn't it look wonderful? How gorgeous. One beautifully fitting granny square sweater. So there you have it, guys. That's how to make a 4 granny square sweater. Now, obviously, I won't be able to try this one on for size. It's just going to be a little bit small, I think. However, I did use the exact same techniques to make this comfy jumper, and I haven't been out of it since the day I made it. I am absolutely thrilled, and it is super comfortable and fits me perfectly, which is exactly what I wanted. Now, if you have any questions about the project, if you've got stuck somewhere or wasn't clear about something, by all means, leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to help you out. If your question's a little bit more complicated and you'd like to send some photos of your project just to help explain what the issue is, my email address is also down in the description, so please feel free to contact me and let me know what the issue is, and I'll do my best to give you a hand. Well, if you're still with me, then thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend with me. I hope you're comfortable walking around in your brand new Granny Square sweater. I'd love to see them. You can post them up in the community tab here on YouTube, or you could also consider joining our Facebook group. We're always over there chatting away and helping each other out with advice, asking questions, and I would love to see all those beautiful new sweaters that you've made. A special thank you definitely has to go out to my beautiful channel members, my yarnies. Thank you so much for all of your support. It's because of you supporting this channel that I'm able to continue to make content, and it just means the absolute world to me. So thank you so much for that. All right, guys, take care of each other and take care of yourself, because you absolutely do deserve it. Wrap yourself up in a beautiful sweater, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye for now.